elicitation, requirements elicitation, or elicitation in general, is quite important. Essentially, when you look at the knowledge areas, there is a specific dedicated knowledge area for elicitation and collaboration with the stakeholders, which is achieved through, in fact, elicitation, is quite important. Now, what is the requirements elicitation? It's just basically requirements gathering, information gathering, or sometimes it's called requirements capture, requirements discovery, and so on and so forth. What it essentially means, or what type of activities it involves, three main activities we can differentiate, or we can come up with. What information should be gathered is what you need to decide in elicitation. From what resources you get this information, and through what mechanisms, what techniques it can be gathered. This information that you would like to gather can be gathered. So that's what elicitation is. Essentially, I mean, you can say, hey, ask the user or ask some stakeholders and they would tell you. It should be simple, but as I mentioned, it is the most difficult, most critical, most error-prone, most communication-intensive aspect of any kind of system or software development, IT system development. I would also like to remind you that in fact the most important factors leading to failure factors, is lack of user involvement, lack of input, lack of user input, lack of stakeholder input, and insufficient collaboration. So this also tells that we're not very successful at doing that. Why? Because it's difficult. Because it's much more fun, if you ask me, to just jump into the development and just start developing something for the user, instead of just going and chasing stakeholders, understanding what they need, and come up with something that's consistent and something that everybody likes and something that everybody would agree upon. That's the difficulty. So nobody, let's say many people, by nature perhaps, we don't want to get into that kind of an hassle. And that's why many kind of IT software system development projects basically fail or challenge. So there are quite a lot of challenges to elicitation. So first, users may not be able to express what they need, why they need it, what they do, and why they do it. That's one of the things. So I mean, they're so much into it that when you ask what they do, what you do, or what you need, they will not be able to. They will not be in the position to say that, okay, I do that thing and I do that one as well. So it's so innate. Or they will start talking about things that a business analyst who is not in that particular domain will be able to understand. So they come up with their own language, the terminology, which might be a little bit distant or not known by the business analyst. Stakeholders' requirements may conflict, so particularly due to some political games that you see in some organizations, that somebody says something and the other stakeholder says something that's conflicting with the other one. So it's your job to just come up with something that is agreeable by all parties sometimes. So you can escalate the problems obviously, but usually it ends up in your hands. There might be end-user resistance to change as well. So again, this is so, I mean, you might, as a business analyst, you might be kind of so naive to think that everybody is very much like willing to come up to invest time and energy on the development of software system, but it is not. People not always like to change, in fact. Key users are usually busy. I mean, you would see, and we'll also mention that we would like to define some product champions among the stakeholders, or one group of people that would be very much, that we expect them to put a lot of effort in the project. We choose them, and those people who are usually willing to also contribute, they're usually quite busy people. They do their job quite nicely and they know what to do. So these are very, let's say, valuable people, and there's not just valuable to you, but also valuable to the organization. So they're usually busy, and that is also another challenge that you might need to deal with. Political factors may influence, obviously, the system requirements. I have worked in several projects where you see, like in the middle of a project, in fact, so that was a kind of devastating thing for us, but in the middle of a project, just because there's some political stupid reasons, they just cancel the project because of some priorities and so on. So our political factors also influence this elicitation quite a lot. So again, elicitation, knowledge acquisition. Knowledge acquisition about what? First of all, about the organization itself. The structure of the organization, so organigram can help there. Business objectives of that particular organization, or a network of organizations, if you like. Policies, roles and responsibilities, obviously processes as well. About the domain, again, knowledge acquisition about the domain itself, where the problem, the need, the problem is rooted. What else? The regulations that this particular, the organizations operating in that particular business domain have to comply with, laws, regulations, standards, and the system as is and to be. I mean, you might as well be in a situation where you already have a software system and you might need to understand what is lacking there to be able to come up with something that would address the needs, the things that are lacking in the situations, the objectives, the actors and resources involved, the processes, obviously, tasks and workflows, and the problems raised in this context are very important input for the elicitation. Not that some of these might not be applicable for the development of commercial market-driven or mass market software systems, and we have a specific module to address that issue here, REM. So for the remaining of this video, I'll be talking about good practices, and we'll continue talking about good practice perhaps later on as well, in other modules as well. But let me say one thing about the concept of good practices, which you will also find in requirements analysis, requirements management. So in real life, things are, say, rarely deterministic. So and obviously, I mean, solution development is not an exception, or system development is not an exception. So what I'm trying to say is that real life is rarely black and white. So, I mean, it has full of shades, and okay, that's perhaps another very nice discussion that we're not going towards somewhere very nice here, talking about shades between black and white. But I mean, we don't have let me put it that way, we don't have any kind of a complete set of practices, techniques, or whatever you would call, that would work under all circumstances. There's no such thing in real life. Okay, so we'd rather have what we call good practices that we know under many conditions would work. These are really kind of nice things after so many years, after so many kind of failures perhaps, that we know would really work to a large extent in a given proper condition. So, and this is what we're going to discuss. So there are, in fact, I'll be talking about I picked just 3 good practices of elicitations. There are more, but I think these 3 are, let's say, good practices that would work, that I think would work to a large extent in a majority of, in a wider, let's say, range of environments that you would come across. Okay? Okay, now, what are these good practices? Define a product vision and project scope. So first of all, define what this software, what this system should do. Define your business requirements basically, and scope it properly so that everybody understand, or everybody would expect the same thing from this particular software. What are the objectives and so on. So basically, this is business requirements. Define them properly. Identify stakeholders, user classes properly, and as I mentioned like a few minutes ago, select a product champion or owner for each user class. So you would see that there will be a lot of stakeholders involved, as also as users, and it's a good practice to select one of these, let's say, member from one of from each stakeholder group to work closely, and also to act as a kind of bridge between business analysts and the end users, and use multiple elicitation techniques, not just one, but multiple elicitation techniques to gather requirements. And then we'll spend quite a lot of time on elicitation techniques in the coming video. And we'll be talking more about the details of these practices, good practices, in another video. So that's it for now. Yeah, see you in the next one.